small. Wow, tiny.
You are currently listening to Tiny Table,
where we explore TTRPGs you might not have heard of.
Whether big or small, we hope to cover them all.
Because we know that great things can come in tiny packages.
Draw Steel has died. Grab your monster-slaying implement of choice, and trust me, there are plenty. Wipe off that mutton from your plate, male, and quaff down those health potions. You'll need them as we get ready to dissect in this post-mortem.
Huzzah!
Huzzah!
Shing!
Shing! And all that. Yeah, I knew it.
It's all so beautifully real, everyone.
It's real.
It's real. It's everything I wanted it to be.
The 4E heads are celebrating.
Mm-hmm. Truly a version of 4E that has its balancing done properly out the gate. It's a Christmas miracle here in the new year.
And with that said, before we get into any sort of, critiques, compliments, things we liked or didn't like, I think it's very important to do what this game already does for itself within its rulebook and kind of establish some expectations that I think are very important to have going into Draw Steel, because the game is phenomenal at what it does and it knows specifically what it wants to be, and it tells you this right from the get-go. But if you're trying to use Draw Steel as your generic fantasy heartbreaker, your D&D filler, your whatever it may be, it offers a very specific experience that it tells you up front, and trying to mold it into something that it is not, I don't think will serve you or your table that well. Julian, I think you had the 4 kind of pillars or core elements pulled up, is that correct?
Yeah, so this is the log line of the game itself. Draw Steel is tactical, heroic, cinematic fantasy. And it gives, in its opening introductory sequence, before it gives you the glossary or the rules or anything, it gives you a breakdown of what it means by each of those 4 terms. And it gives you some recommendations if you have other things you want from your fantasy games. It doesn't just say, hey, that's something we don't do. It gives you a direction to go. I'll read like an example. This game will absolutely feature dungeons, ancient underground complexes filled with ravenous undead or creeping oozes, but it isn't a dungeon crawler. It's not about clearing rooms. It's not a survival horror game where you track your light and your food and the weight of what you carry. You can fight monsters in a dungeon, but the game is not about dungeons. Lots of games focus on that gameplay and do it really well. We like Shadowdark.
And I want to say, this opening statement gave me so much love and respect for the creators of Draw Steel, because it truly feels like a love letter to the community. The fact that they are so immersed and so familiar with so many of these other games, and openly in their first pages recommend you to go to experiences that are not them based on what you're looking for. Like, that shows a level of care for the TRPG space that is just really admirable. It was just a big green flag right from the get-go. And don't get me wrong, this game has so much to support things like social, which we'll definitely be talking about, as well as, exploration, all these other elements, but its focus is going to be on that cinematic tactical combat.
I love a game with a thesis statement, just right up front. Like, this is what we are about. This is what we specialize in. If you are looking for X experience, seek elsewhere, with a helpful link to the game they mention. I feel like sometimes our critiques, right, of other games can get into like, oh, it lacks this, or oh, it doesn't really quite get at that. But this game circumvents that by just being very upfront with what it does and does not do, which I think is great, right? Like, when you're watching a movie or, playing a board game even, like, it should tell you what it's going to do for you, right? It's just setting expectations.
And I think that is doubly important in the particular context that we see Draw Steel release in. Draw Steel is one of the post-OGL juggernauts, right? We have the big OGL debacle a couple of years ago. It kills a ton of faith in Wizards of the Coast, and it spurs this drive for a bunch of the big names in the space to make their own big fantasy heartbreaker. Can we be your table's next D&D, right? We see it with Daggerheart, we see it with Drawsteel, we see it with Tales of the Valiant from Kobold Press, and I feel like the ones of those that have failed, in my opinion, or have not done enough, in my opinion, like Tales of the Valiant by Kobold Press, rest in peace, is that they're trying to do just D&D again. And ultimately, the problem is, it's like, listen, the OGL debacle caused a lot of shaking of the faith in the professional sidecar space of this hobby, but the 5e books are just as usable for the 5e heads as they've always been. So making a 5e killer that's just 5e twice is a terrible idea. This game comes out and says, listen, we can't do everything that your Dungeons and Dragons game can do because we're not about that. We are a fantasy game. We are a game focused on playing progression fantasy characters. There are a lot of overlaps of interest, but we are fundamentally different than the D20 fantasy you're coming from, and here's why you should care. They even recommend Daggerheart in their opening crawl, saying, like, here's a thing that Daggerheart does better than us, and here's a thing we do more focused and better than Daggerheart.
Rip to Kobold Press's module because they were not mentioned in the beginning.
Yeah, and it's a shame because I like a lot of their content for 5th edition, but they kind of rushed it out the door to be like, oh, if we're first on the playing field in this OGL mess, maybe that's enough to get our game big, and it was just 5e with serial numbers filed off, whereas this is a really fresh take, a really new experience.
And what I really enjoyed was that I feel like because of the big three D&D heads turned, we're going to make our own system of Kobold Press, Critical Role Darrington Press, and MCDM, is that I really felt like MCDM didn't rush, and they took their time, and they really thought about what they liked and what they wanted to do differently. And I think it shows in the way that Kobold Press put it out first. It's pretty much a D&D clone. Daggerheart came out next, and granted, maybe my view is a little skewed because we played it when it was the beta versus the full release, but from what I've heard, it seems like it's not super different from the beta that we played, which is totally fine. I still really enjoyed it, and they do some new things, they do some really interesting things, but it very much feels like, do you still like D&D but you don't like Wizards? You can play this game and maybe feel a little more morally sound, and it does some new interesting things, and it's a little cleaner, a little more compact. This game feels so different from D&D that the only really similar things is the flavor of some player-like races and the flavor of some classes, but it really feels so distinctly different, and I really like that.
Yeah, because even if you go to like Matt Coville's YouTube channel where he's talking about the game, they do a lot to specifically distinguish themselves from other high fantasy TRPGs. A lot of what they talk about is, we didn't call it the Barbarian because that wasn't like our concept. We started from the concept of we want a, primal fighter, and we called it the Fury because that felt more appropriate and that felt like it embodied the image that we were trying to go for. They tackle it from a very different way where they aren't just trying to like take the D&D classes and reinvent them, or take the, the tropes that you're used to and then, give them a twist so they're different. They're not trying to copy someone else's homework. In fact, they're trying to separate themselves so much from everyone else. And by doing so, they've really carved their own identity in a way that I really appreciate. And I think more games would really benefit from having a thesis statement like this, of listing their core values and concepts so there's not any confusion. Because I don't know about y'all, I don't get mad at Uno for not having a Rube Goldberg machine like Mousetrap, that's not a thing that I judge it on. But if Uno came out like, we're the Mousetrap killer guys, I'd be like, what the fuck are you talking about?
I want to start to dive into our thoughts on the combat system, because ultimately, and I think this is made very explicit, the big primary focus of this game is on its combat. It isn't as concerned with having in-depth and nuanced rules for exploration. The negotiation rules, while excellent, is a 10-page chapter. This is a game about tactical, heroic fantasy fighting, and I think it is so great at that. And I want to dive into what is it that's different about the combat in this game from things like D20 Fantasy that make it really sing. The thing I'm going to start off with, you're always making progress. There are no misses. That single change of changing the expectations of the math of the game around, like, you're doing a little damage with a little impact to a ton of damage and a ton of impact with a middle result in between, instead of being the binary you hit or you don't hit, is so much better feeling because you're always schmoving.
Huge for players like me. I cannot tell you how many times, actually, I don't need to tell you, you've probably listened to me miss a freaking Gerblin before on this very podcast, and it sucks ass. Your whole turn is wasted. It feels completely unheroic. Why is it happening? Fine, if you're like, this is my very first day of adventuring, this is the first time I've picked up a sword, sure, you could miss. I am a hero of the realm. I better fucking hit with my sword. If it does less damage, then sure. Like, it feels so much better. And it sticks by the thesis of heroism, heroics. You are a hero. Your swings do not miss.
To kind of bounce off of that, I think it also helps that they use the distinct term stamina rather than health, which I think kind of doubles up on this concept of there is always progress, because you could even within the flavor text say that there was a miss or say that it, shinked off your armor, but if you're dodging a blow or you're just narrowly avoiding a thing with your shield, that's exhausting. You're losing stamina rather than it being like every attack pierces you and like does damage to your health. I think by creating that separation, it also helps with that always moving forward, always progressing. When, you're making progress on an enemy monster, even if it's not a lot, you're tiring it out. You are making it vulnerable for that final strike. And I think that little distinction also helps with that kind of eternal progress and helps for players to understand that, like, terminology wise, because I feel like health has that issue of like, okay, I took 2 damage. What does that mean? I have a bloody nose now because I got hit, or I scraped my knee or whatever. That's not very heroic or cinematic or whatever. Like, who cares? Versus this, it's like, oh, I'm a little winded from that blow, regardless of what the actual end result is.
Yeah, and I kind of want to touch on that point and another point. And forgive me, I will be comparing Draw Steel to a lot of the other fantasy heartbreakers, because I do think that's important to do when you're talking about a genre like this. So the thing that I really like that a lot of fantasy heartbreakers are doing, especially with stamina, is that we're moving away from the terminology like hit points, health points, and we're looking at this pool of resource that you lose in combat at something that is easier to gain back to make the verisimilitude of a long rest, for lack of a better word, make more sense. Because if you are getting your guts torn out, you shouldn't be able to take a night's rest and be better from that. And the idea of stamina of like, you just have to rest, or if you really get knocked the frick out, that's where the magic comes in. But the thing that I really want to talk about, to Julian's question about the combat, is I love that every single class has a unique resource pool that you uniquely can gain, and you gain them the more times you do combat. So you want to do more combat in a day because you get more victory points, which means you get more of your class specific resource, which means you can do your cooler moves. And it makes every class feel very distinct, and I like the words they use for it because it feels very thematic, and it really helps differentiate the classes, because in some other systems, D&D, most players and characters are using spell slots, and at a point, like, other than a few spells, a druid and a cleric feel very similar. But I never felt like my shadow and Skylar's tactician were similar at all.
Completely agreed. And I think in addition to the feel of it being more unique, which is great. It's evocative. It has an inverted relationship to its resource economy, right? In a thing like Dungeons and Dragons that operates in this survivalist mindset, this like survival sim kind of mode, you start the day with all of your resources, and the core challenge is tactically deciding when to expend resources that are costly to recover. Costly with time, like with a long rest. Do I really want to spend my only 3rd level spell slot on this fight, or do I want to save it for later because I think it'll be helpful later? It's a system where you start at max and your choices are about degeneration, right? About how much you spend and lose. This system is generative instead of degenerative. You start at your weakest at the start of the day, where at the start of every fight you have none of your heroic resource, and you're building it only through the natural course of round over round combat, so that encourages you to play to your type right away. The tactician wants to make use of the thing that gains the tactician's focus right away, because it's the only way they're going to gain it at the start. So it gives you incentive to play to type right away, and then as the day goes on, you win these fights, you gain more victories, but you're spending recoveries. You're losing your stamina, spending your limited pool of recoveries to regain, and that pool will only be refreshed by a respite, a leave from the adventure, which resets your victories. So you have this drive to push further and further and further and be a hero who delves that last space deeper into the danger, because every fight you do, you're starting it stronger instead of weaker in terms of your abilities. They gave the comparison during one of their earlier dev diaries that they were following the cadence of play of like a MOBA or a hero shooter, where you're building up your ult over time, and by engaging in play, you're getting resources that feed your character's abilities and make their ult stronger, and you can get your ult sooner in the fight. And I'm like, that's genius. That's so much more in the cadence of how your average fantasy cinema portrays these arcs of combat. It isn't like, oh, your hero starts super strong and then by the end they're like wheezing and puffing and desperate for a rest. You know, they grow and they get stronger because they're adventuring, and that's how you do the arc of like a 3-act fantasy adventure.
It's kind of like League when you think about it.
Oh, don't bring that accursed name in here. That said, I do want to kind of jump off another point with this whole heroic resource system. And the thing that I really like about the heroic resources is that for the majority of the classes, they can be generated based on what the other players at the table are doing, encouraging you to be engaged with your party as you are adventuring and being engaged in the other players' mechanics and in the other players' turns. Because, like, for instance, as the tactician, me marking someone means that I benefit not just if I go up and hit the mark. In fact, I actually don't even think me hitting the marked target gives me anything aside from the edge and normal benefits. But if one of you two hits the mark, that's a point. That's charging my ult for me. If one of you two uses a heroic ability, that's a point for me. If one of us crits, that's a point for Neo. It really makes you feel invested in what your fellow players at the table are doing, because any one of those actions could mean that final step towards getting that ultimate ability that saves the day and finally takes down the beast that you've been fighting for however many rounds. It's really, really engaging.
It's also great because when gaining your heroic resource in the rules, you're allowed to break up your turn. You're allowed to break up your turn into, like, when you gain the resource, when you do an action that gains another resource, which allows you to do like a combo move off of that to make your next action possible. Like it's very modular in how you're allowed to break up your turn, so you can gain and spend the resource that you gained on that same exact turn, which is like the combinations and the sequencing and the tactics of it lights up the brain. It's so exciting, and it feels electric when you spend the resource that you just gained to pull off like a super cool move.
I totally agree. And honestly, the biggest thing I got from this, I wanted to level up. I wanted to play more. I wanted to see what high level combat looked like, because even level 1 combat, was so fun. And like, ugh, how often can you say that in a fantasy heartbreaker that level 1 combat was fun?
The level 1 fight against like a group of goblins who took a girl. Like, we were playing the fantasy intro adventure, right? The blacksmith's daughter got taken by goblins. That's the OG. And like, I've never had more fun with that adventure than in this game.
Yeah, because the way they have it set up is they front load a lot of your abilities. You get a lot at first level, which I think is meant to emphasize, again, that like focus on heroics. You're not some chumps just now starting to adventure. You are heroes by default. They encourage you to have like, what got you into this, and why would people maybe even know you even on a small scale? Like, what have you done, you know? I like that they specifically emphasize that you are already someone with a bit of renown, with a bit of a history. Nothing crazy, you know, you're not a kingslayer, you're not fighting demons and gods and dragons, but you have some history. I think it forces players to consider their character a little bit more, and they give a very specific scope that I think is good. And if you guys have other points you want to talk on, I'll bounce off to you. But after this, I do want to hit on the dice system, because I think that's another part that makes the combat in this game feel really rewarding and have the amazing flow that it has as well.
I feel like the system reminds me a lot of Yeld in a way that I really like, in the form of the character creator, in the way that the classes feel very distinct and very important, and not something that you can kind of mix and match in a good way. But then on top of that, the way you can kind of make it your own is there are a ton of kits and different attributes you can add. I mean, Yeld won our best long form game for our Tiny Table year in review. So it makes sense that we like Draw Steel, because I actually feel like Draw Steel in a way is kind of like adult Yeld.
Before we even get into dice, this game respects your character. It's not that it's just, you know, it makes players consider their character. Players are definitely considering their character. Players are agonizing over their little Blorbo and their tragic backstory. And it sucks if they die at level 1, because that's lame as fuck. This game respects your character as a hero.
On the level of those characters, I think one really fun thing, I think it has a lovely layered build, your ancestry into the culture that raised you, into the class that defines you, into a complication by chance. And I want to really quickly, before we get into the dice, I want to hear everyone's favorite from the 100 complications you can find on page 233.
Isn't it crazy? Maybe I'm just feeling the reverberations and the trauma from Vampire the Masquerade, but isn't it crazy that in their index, Julian, they listed those things out exactly in that order that you just listed them out, and then wouldn't you know it, the order that they show up and are relevant to creating your character are listed directly one at a time in that order.
It's almost like they want you to go in a sequence, and they want to make it easy for you.
Wow. What a novel approach.
That said, because I kind of interrupted, I'll start us off here first and actually get us back on topic. My favorite of the complications, and there are many, like they're all like really, really interesting, and they all really add like a unique touch to any character. But my favorite is a bit of a two-part, because there's a little complication called an Infernal Contract, where whenever you're present for a battle in which both sides have creatures who aren't surprised, you can determine if your side goes first on a roll or 4 or higher. So basically you get better initiative. However, an Archdevil occasionally asks you to defeat enemies on their behalf. And if you refuse, the patron sends devils after you and those you care about. Okay, pretty classic. You get a little edge in combat, you're more likely to move first, but ooh, there's some narrative stuff that might happen. And then immediately afterwards is my favorite, which is Infernal Contract, ... but like bad. And for this, it's explicit that you made a very shitty deal. You get like either 2 renown or 2 wealth or a very small bonus to stamina, just +3. Things that are pretty insignificant. The benefit is ass. And in return, your body bears a fiendish mark. Any creature who understands religion and notes the mark can tell that your soul belongs to hell, imposing a bane on any test you make to interact with those creatures. And when you die, your soul goes to hell and can't be restored to life. So they have a complication that is just the thing, but actually bad. It explicitly states that, yeah, you're kind of a loser for making this deal. You don't get a lot out of it, and I think that is hilarious.
So I kind of have a two-parter as well for my favorite. So I'll start with the first one that I think is interesting, but a little less interesting, which is forbidden romance. So the whole idea is that you're in love with somebody powerful, but for whatever reason, you guys can't be together. So the benefit is that you can secretly call on them for favors, and they can like support you from afar, but it might not be like as much, and they can't reveal their connection. And on the flip side, the drawback is that when they're in trouble, they can call on you, but if the relationship is discovered, the circumstances that keep you apart will be made worse. It's a really good and juicy hook into a plot for the director to use and call upon, and I think it's a great plot point. I mean, who doesn't in D&D love a steamy romance that's not going to work out with an NPC to flirt with your friend?
Romeo and Juliet, but they're both huge and kill dragons.
And speaking of dragons, my favorite, and who's surprised by this, is Dragon Dreams. So the whole idea is that you have strange dreams of a raging inferno, treasure, spreading your wings, but you know, like, you don't tell anyone about this. It's a very secret, hush hush. And the benefit is that you can choose 2 ancestry points worth of purchased Dragon Knight traits, and then you can use these traits whenever you have 5 or more victories.
So cool.
The drawback is that when you're reduced to 0 stamina, you explode with heat and fire, and you and each creature within 5 squares of you take fire damage equal to twice your level, and you cannot reduce this damage for yourself in any way.
You just explode.
You just explode.
Wow.
You just explode.
Within 5 squares, which is a lot.
That's wild. That's really
huge.
far.
That's huge in this game.
Squares.
For twice your level. Like, it's dire.
I love all the complications. I love that come with benefits and drawbacks just initially as part of their setup. They've got all the classics like you have to avenge someone, or your mentor was evil and so you now have to slay them, or whatever. They have all the like you were struck by lightning, you were blessed by trees, you drowned and came back different, you know, all those kind of elemental qualities, right? That like give you a lot of room to sort of custom fit your character. But my favorite one is lost your head. A breadbettle stole your head. Usually, being beheaded by monsters means certain death, but your latent psionic ability allows you to survive despite your decapitation. So you're just a headless horseman, and you have your benefit is called share head. You're allowed to psionically borrow other people's heads to like look around or talk, but they have to be willing. But when they leave 10 squares away from you or no longer want to share their head with you, you can't. And then the drawback is you don't have a fucking head. You can't see, you can't smell, you can't hear, and you can't wear helmets or hats. So freaking ridiculous.
I like that a big drawback is you can't wear a hat.
Yeah,
'cause
that's
that is a big
brutal.
drawback.
That's
tough to
that's
deal with.
honestly brutal. I think they should tweak that, honestly. That seems a little unbalanced.
Yeah, it's kind of a heavy nerf, TBQH.
Yeah, that's really tough. That's actually kind of a
But it's
Yeah, I don't
just
think I
so
could do
funny
that.
to me. The benefit is the benefit of having a head.
Yep. And the drawback is you ain't got no head.
So, no head.
Heavy is the neck that wears the crown, am I right?
the way that we were all like elbowing each other to try to get the so no head joke out. I wish you could see the way we were all like so.
But I got it first, bitch.
And I'll bring us on home on the complications. My favorite is the meddling butler. You're not sure what you did to deserve it, but for some reason, your family saddled you with an old, trusted, extremely irritating family servant. They're supremely competent, of course, but they sometimes seem to forget who's in charge. You get a retainer right away, but Outside of combat, your retainer is under the director's control. The retainer sometimes acts without orders, always with your best interests at heart, but often in embarrassing or inconvenient ways.
You get an Albert.
You get a worse Alfred.
A worse Alfred.
I love Albert.
Albert. Well, yeah, he is
you do get an
'cause
Albert.
He's
It's the Timu Alfred.
The team, not the Timu Alfred.
Master White.
That's such a perfect
Yeah.
DMPC.
Alfred from Wish.
Skylar, you were looking to talk about the dice mechanics.
Yes. I really like, and this is again kind of talking about how Matt Colville and the team are trying to get away from the more typical fantasy heartbreaker. A lot of things, even my oh so beloved Pathfinder, use a D20 system. You know, it's popularized. It's been around for forever now. You know, but there's some you know funkiness with the math of a D20. You know, in regards to just the range of results that it provides, and so they instead opt for a 2D10 system. And I really like the kind of averaging out that the 2D10 has just in regards to its numbers, with the average result being an 11, which is still tier 1. However, we've already discussed that even the lowest tier is going to produce success for you. However, I like, one, the feeling of rolling more dice. I think it's good. I think it's very fun. And the feeling of getting a crit, although I don't think it happened to me, but it happened to both of you, I believe, feels much more impactful. In D&D, I feel like I've started, maybe it's just because I've been playing for so long, but I feel like crits are still exciting, but it is like a 5% chance, which isn't like that unlikely, really. Like, it's not that uncommon to hit a 5% chance, you know, for either for failure or for success. For this, it's only 3 results out of a much larger, you know, like combination. You know, it's either you get 2 10s, or one's a 10 and one's a 9, or the other one's a 10 and one's a 9. And the payout you get for this much, at least feeling rarer result, is a whole extra action. It's not just max damage, because the damage numbers are already set. It's not, you know, like, ooh, but roll again, or a condition. It's okay, cool. You max out like a tier 3 success, and then you just get to do a whole other thing, which is crazy, which is absolutely insane. I guess I should let you two talk about it more, because you actually got to feel the payoff of that. But there was not a time, even as someone who didn't roll a crit, that was not exciting or terrifying when I believe I got critted on actually within our live recording.
Yeah, I mean, I am glad that systems are kind of going away from the D20, despite me having so many in my collection, because there's no more okay feeling than when you roll, like, I don't know, an 11. And you're like, all right.
Oh, an 11. An 11 is high for me. An 11 sounds great.
So I'm so sorry. I should check my privilege. But I'm thinking, I think I rolled a crit on like a skill test or something, and it did feel really cool. But I kind of want to pass it to Neo, because Neo rolled it on an attack, which yields much cooler results.
Yeah, getting to have an entire second turn after rolling a crit makes it feel so much more valuable and so much more rewarding, especially in a combat sense. I guess, you know, if you think about it, if you roll a d20 and you get to do double damage, it's sort of similar, right? One could parse that they could be quote unquote the same effect, but being allowed to have a whole other main action allows you to potentially generate enough heroic resources from the previous main action that you just did to allow yourself to do another like huge splash move and like really cash out on all of the momentum you've been building and continue to build even more. Like, it was just like so fucking awesome. I really can't say more than that. It was just freaking awesome.
100%. Another element of the dice system I think is a really lovely innovation are the edges and the banes. It's a kind of a well-worn point that 5e introducing advantage disadvantage was a very elegant solution to the 3.5 bloat of stacking many floating modifiers to a roll. The number one piece of negative or constructive feedback, though, that you always hear about advantage and disadvantage is the fact that in aiming at simplicity, they said, oh, any amount of advantage, any amount of disadvantage, it always just cancels out. So it can feel quite strange if you are, systems literate for 5th edition. You know that you've got advantage 20 ways to Sunday, and then one thing giving disadvantage, and the whole thing just goes away. And it feels very strange, right? And they say, oh, it's so we don't have to keep track of how many advantages there are. It's like, okay, I get the notion. I think this game solves the problem by having edges, banes, double edges, and double banes.
Yeah.
With this system, it still has the elegance of not needing to keep track. It's just, is there one edge or bane, or are there multiple? Soon as there's multiple, it's a double. And edges and banes cancel each other out. Double edges and double banes cancel each other out. But if you've got a bunch of banes and only one edge, you still keep a bane. Vice versa for double edges over banes. Like, it lets you still have a real sense of stacking advantage without needing to get into the weeds of exactly how much of it you have. If you've got more than one, you've got double.
One piece of actually maybe like just terminology critique I have on it, while the system itself operates incredibly elegantly, I do know for a fact that there were a couple of times where the language of double edge versus double bane did lead to some confusion. I think it was, if it was just called like multi-edge or multi-bane, something like that. It's like, edge versus multiple edge, which literally just encapsulates 2 or more, rather than double, which implies 2 but could be 3, 4, 5, etc. I think there's maybe like a bit of like terminology tweak that could potentially help there.
I just counter you this. Double bane sounds great.
Double edge. Double edge.
Double edge. I
Double-edged sword.
I
Oh, my
see what
favorite
you're
Pokemon move.
Oh, it's a double edge.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, I see what you're saying, but it sounds better to say.
Yeah, it does sound better to say.
That's game design. I think you gotta.
Yeah.
win
Double
some, lose
edge
some.
evokes double edge sword. Multi edge is a JRPG move.
Yeah. And I will, to the game's kind of like thesis, or at least to a lot of the practice, this game kind of just does operate by the rule of cool when it comes to naming things.
Yeah.
Most of its shit is named the way it is just because it sounds awesome. Like, that is like a big philosophy, is just like, what would be the dopest way to name this move? The move names are so good. Or even like, we've been using the term heroic resource, but each of them has like a specific name. My favorite of which is drama by far.
Drama's the best one.
Of all of the classes, I feel like the Troubadour's Auteur has the best ability names. And it's the one I played because it has stuff like, wait, that's not how it really happened. Or, we need you alive for the sequel. Like, things like that. Like, another element of this entire rules text that I love is its humor. Like, even within its rules, from moment to moment, there's so much humor. And a sort of speaking to the audience like a friend, or the reader like a friend. It feels very humorous to read, and like in a way that is like understandable. Like, even like in the first thing where it's like, what do we mean by fantasy? Dragons and stuff. You know what I mean? It's just very frank and has a lot of humor. And so like all the ability names are like everything from like very cool to like kind of funny, and it's written with a lot of humor.
Oh, 100%. And you can tell that they're funny nerds because they gave themselves witty taglines for every like action move they do. Like, for one of my maneuvers, it was 2 throats at once, and then the tagline was a bargain. Like, come on.
So cute.
It's so good. I also do want to shout out, in addition to how evocative those are for the players, having those for the monsters as well makes it so that it is really easy to run a monster right off the page, right? I pick up a monster kit, I'm looking at it, and instantly I see like, okay, this one's a maneuver, this one's a main action, those things can synergize, and their evocative names tell me how to narrate.
And Julie, you just said a little key phrase there, maybe unintentionally or otherwise, but I do have to discuss the kits system just very briefly as a final kind of node to the amazing character creation this game has. I like that they distinguish your character in multiple ways, especially if you're someone who does martial, by not just being like, all right, you have martial proficiency, you can pick a great sword or a big hammer, but those functionally do the same thing. Instead, it's like, no, go in, and if you're like a martial class and your main thing isn't like necessarily casting, like I think their cleric and their mage, their elementalist, I believe it's called, don't necessarily get kits, but if you're, I think, literally any of our three classes, or the vast majority, you can pick things like Sniper, which gives you bonus damage on your tier 3 rolls for range, but also gives you bonuses to, like, you know, disengage. Some of them will give you bonuses to your HP, and they give you also unique flavors for how you fight things and which kind of like main attributes you're going to use for combat. They give you a lot of flexibility, which lead to one of the coolest character designs in yours, Neo, a bard with a big ass fucking like bat thing.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think that's what's so nice about the kits and what they do is that they allow you to really create an interesting warrior character. Fighting and martial isn't just the difference between am I swinging a sword or am I swinging a hammer, which do like 1d10 versus 1d8 damage. It is like I'm using the Panther kit, which allows me to gain more damage if I move in a straight line. Or I'm using the Swashbuckler kit, which allows me to do XYZ. You know what I mean? Like, there are so many. Spell Sword, Swashbuckler, Ranger, Pugilist, you know, Grease Armor, Mountain, you know what I mean? Like, all these, like, very evocative styles of fighting. They are evocative of a trope or archetype of a martial combatant, which you can combine and mix in new and unconventional ways, right? The class does not just determine the fighting, it's also the kit. My only point of concern is that in this game, it says if you're not liking your XYZ, you can change kits between short rests. It also says stuff like you can change classes and I think even races during short rests, which is, I think, weird.
It doesn't say you can change your class and your ancestry as like a function of a respite, but it tells you that if you play like a session or two and you go, you know, I'm just not vibing with the mechanics, talk to your director and be like, yeah, we could just change it. We'll change it now.
I like the idea that you're welcome to do that. I think that's important for like a player to be like, I tried this out and it's not really what I was hoping for. Can I do something else without 100% having to kill off their character? But it's really funny if your buddy who's like a dragon knight woke up one day and there were a woad elf archer mage, be like, what happened to you?
And then the Autor Troubadour says, no, they were always a woad elf. We had to do a little recasting.
They're like, what is it, Mystique from the X-Men? Just like shape-shifting night by night.
It's so funny.
That's a complication. I do want to, before we wrap, give a little point of conversation to negotiation, a rule set that I think is quite elegantly designed, but with the nature of the Delian Tomb, there is no real point for negotiation in the actual play we did. And I want to hit on it because I think it's pretty good. I think it is good because it runs on the same mode of specificity that we think is one of the big factors for this game's success. It explicitly tells you, hey, here are the rules for negotiation. When do you use these rules? You use these rules when your character or characters are talking to an NPC who has something you want to get it from them in a negotiation, a conversation. It needs to be somebody who is willing to listen to you, but not just gonna give it to you right away. That's a very particular window for when to use these rules. And then it tells you, hey, if you're like trying to intimidate some info out of a dude you just beat in a fight, don't go into a negotiation. Make one might roll and add your intimidate skill if you have it. This is for when you're focusing the conversation on the back and forth, jockeying for position in this conversational context. And I think it lets itself really sing because it has to focus only on a particular type of dialogue scene. It isn't trying to cover every single base. You don't use negotiation rules for flirting with the barmaid, right? And because it's so structured, they get to have some really excellent design for it. NPCs have interest, which shows how willing they are to give you a good deal in their offer, and then patience that ticks down and down and down as you whittle their patience away with more and more arguments. And then at every point, when you make the offer, you make the roll, the NPC brings in their answer to your argument, and then you as a player group say, do we take that deal or are we going to push it further? And then all of it gets to really sing because it has the lovely motivations and pitfall system that says we're going beyond just raw dice luck here. We're going into how do you talk to the NPC? How do you evaluate what is important to them or what might be a bit of a touchy subject for them? And it gives you differences in the results based on how you've been speaking to them that then really inform both the players and the director as to how to approach the next step of the scene. It takes a thing that, when scripted, is very compelling, but when done extemporaneously can be very difficult to just come up with on the fly, that kind of tete-a-tete, back and forth jockeying for position, and it systematizes it in a way that's simple enough that it still lets the focus on conversation shine.
And I mean, it's kind of reflected in the name too, right? It's not like, hey, here are the social combat rules, or hey, here are the talking rules. This is for negotiation. And again, I think specificity is the name of the game when it comes to draw steel, because everything it does, it specifies ahead of time and then excels at.
I have exactly one critique for this entire game, and it's just that some of the hot links in the PDF don't work at time of recording. That's my only critique for this 400-page game. This game is fucking awesome.
Barely feels like 400 pages. It was a breeze to read, you know. Again, we were we had a hell of a warm up with our previous game, but with the majority of it being like very specific, like class features or kits or like rules that like you may not even need to concern yourself with, the stuff that actually matters is a breeze to get through. So, good job, Draw Steel. Friggin' fantastic.
So I think it's obvious we really enjoyed this game to the point that we might be playing it off mic in our own home game. So I guess we'll let you know maybe
The
how
fourth
higher
edition
levels are.
pervert
But
finally wins. Finally.
and with that, that is our actual play of Draw Steel. We'll see you in 2 weeks with what's that? Who's that game designer?
Oh.
Julian?
Yeah, we're introducing a new format to the table next week with the debut episode of Tiny Tests, where we are going to do a playtest of one of my games in development. We are going to be playing Ride or Wait, my tarot-based game about waiting for the bus.
Ooh.
I'm so excited.
Guess you'll have to figure out more about that in 2 weeks. We'll see you then.
Bye.
And until next time,
Bye-bye.
peace out.
Hi, and thank you for listening to our podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, then we'd really appreciate if you left us a review. If you really like what we do here and want to support us further, you can join us at patreon.com/tinytablepodcast. Our business email is also open for inquiries at tinytablebusiness@gmail.com, and all of our socials can be found in the episode description for any shenanigans you might want to follow. Till next time, see ya!